we are beginning the plumbing process of the car here, and one of the first things you got to do plumbing a race car is locate all of your items that need plumbing. Showed you we got the engine put together, so we have the short block sitting in the car, and obviously the oil pump is where it's going to be. We've mounted the oil filter down here. The oil tank is in the car. It's bolted in for good, shouldn't have to take that back out. You can see that heater element in there. And then got a little, that's our 110 bolt wire hanging out. Alright, so oil lines, water lines, as I've showed you numerous times. Our water pump is under the car. Radiator is in. Just for mock-up again, we got the fuel cell all installed in the car. Fuel filler is there. Not sure that you guys saw that. And we mounted our injector dynamics, the IDF750 here. This is a super cool fuel filter. Has a spin-off design with a replaceable element. It has like a sample valve, and it even has a flow meter built in. Very cool. These are on our site. I'll put a link in the description so you can check these out. They're Dash 8 O-ring in and out. So we're going to come out of our cell and over here to the fuel filter and then towards the engine. The brake system is also going to have to get plumbed, so we bolted in our pedal box. Our reservoirs are up there, and our handbrake here. And we're waiting on our order of XRP fittings, which should be here any day now. And once we get those, we can keep on plumbing. I said that we probably weren't going to run an oil cooler, but we've decided for peace of mind to just put one on anyway. So I'm going to mount that up. Here, we're going to mount it right behind the intercooler. So I'm going to favor the passenger side just so there's more room. And it's going to go somewhere in here like that. Alright, so we're getting this oil cooler mounted up. I have just kind of rough cut out a bracket here. This relief I added so we can bolt it flat onto this rail. Here's our first bracket. And what I'm going to do is take this 3/16 plate that I just cut out. We're going to weld that on there, and that will space it away from the frame rail a little bit. And then to bolt it on, I'm going to use these little countersunk bolts. I welded that little spacer on there, and next thing I'm going to do is locate the two holes where it's going to go through the frame rails. calling them frame rails, but like that substructure that we made. So 2 bolts are going to go through there for my countersunk bolts, and I'm going to put a couple speed holes in this too, just to get rid of some surface area so it looks cool. Here I'm just center punching my holes. When we're cutting holes in sheet metal, we use a rotobroach. It's an annular cutter. Alright, so you can see how good of a hole that rotobroach puts in sheet metal. It's perfect. It only leaves a tiny little burr that we can just sand right off. Again, these holes are really just for aesthetics. But I also put my 2 pilot holes here, so where we're going to bolt it to the frame rail. Right there. Now that we got our pilot holes drilled, we're going to drill them upsize so that we can fit these riv nuts in. Some people call them riv nuts, some people call them a nut cert, but it's basically a threaded rivet. And as you see, this tool looks like a rivet gun because basically you just thread this on to the arbor, squeeze the handle once you insert it into your material, and you now have a fresh threaded hole that you can bolt something to basically anywhere, wherever you want. So we're going to bolt this on using some 1/4-20s. That's my favorite hardware. So now that we got our threaded bungs in here, we can countersink this piece. So we get a drill 1/4-inch hole for the hardware, and then we also need to countersink it so those like flush head bolts will not hit the oil cooler. So we use this special countersink bit, and this particular one also happens to drill a 1/4-inch hole and then puts the chamfer in it on one tool, so that's pretty handy. One move, take our countersunk or flathead bolt. Look at that. No interference issues now. There's our main bracket, all finished up. That's it. Our bracket bolted in. See that flush mount hardware worked out really well. That's where she goes. This is a little detail not many people do. It's a little stick-on rubber isolator for the cooler. And I know that since we're mounting the cooler what would be considered sideways, the bolt going through there, it's not going to have the same effect as if the cooler was like sitting on top of these, but it will still offer some damping protection. So happy to stick them on there, and they're relatively cheap. Whenever we sell a Cetrab cooler, we'll usually suggest buying some of these too. Got it bolted in there. And I put in our new bracket here for the tension rod, and it sat a little close for comfort, and because the holes in the Cetrab cooler are slotted, I decided to cut, I don't know if you can see it there, but I cut a piece of rubber that fits there, so the cooler sits on a piece of rubber actually now instead of floating. And I'm going to make one more bracket to hold this thing up, just from this front cross member structure to there, and that'll probably just get welded on. Maybe I'll bolt it on, we'll see. So I ended up finding this 3/4 by 16 gauge aluminum angle, and sometimes things just work out like that. But it was the perfect height. It came flat off the bottom of this cross member here, and I just kind of beveled some edges, trimmed it up, drilled some holes, and we got a perfect little sturdy bracket to hold the other side of the oil cooler with. So that's it. Oil core is mounted. So the oil core was the last thing I had to mount, and once you have everything in place is when you can start mapping out what hoses and fittings you're going to need for your plumbing project. So I do this for basically every part of the system, right? Because you don't want to just order an arbitrary number of 90s or 45s or whatever straights and just hope that you get it right? Because this stuff's pretty expensive. So the best thing to do is start kind of laying it out, right? Go system by system and get an idea of what you're going to need. So you might label one cooling system, one fuel system, one oil system, and then just go down the list, you know. For instance, here we got this bleeder, right? This is going to come off our header tank, and I need it to bleed actually off of the radiator under here and up to here. So in this case, this is 1/4 NPT. I just know from looking at it, but you should definitely double check. You want to keep a pretty low profile here, right? Because we have our trunk skin. So I'm going to do a 1/4 NPT direct 90 degree, right? So 1/4 NPT thread here, 90 degree to a -6, right? So that'll be the adapter I need there. I make note of that, and then I'm going to 45 off of that, and that'll shoot my hose down underneath of this rear window sill and up, and I'll most likely put a 90 here just to keep that kind of as low profile as possible. So 90 down, up, 45 there, and I'll make note of that. I'm a little old school in that I like to just use a pen and paper for this, though I'm sure it would be a little neater in a spreadsheet format. This is just, it's easy for me to jot something down. You know, my hands might be a little dirty or something in the shop, so it's easy to just kind of jot down what you're working with. And eventually, I end up with something that looks like this. So, for instance, oil plumbing. At the Oberg is the filter in the top of the oil tank. So I started there, and you can really start anywhere. Just make sure that you don't forget any connection. So a -16 O-ring to a -10 AN, and I just know that's a male, but you might want to note if it's a male or female fitting. So that's going to go into the Oberg. And then here's another one, -12, 120 degree, that's the hose end. That is at the pump out. So the pressure out. And so on and so forth. Yeah, this is it. Get a rough idea how much hose you need. It's always idea to err on the side of a little bit more. And if you're doing crimp together fittings like we do here, don't forget to get as many crimp collars as you did hose ends. So that one's for the oil plumbing. Coolant plumbing, same idea. Yep, so there's my quarter MPT 90 to -6 male that I just showed you off the top of the rad, and etc, etc. Every little fitting, everything that goes into like your brakes, you need the adapter fitting that goes into the caliper, and then each end of the hose, the length of hose, if you're putting any sort of like abrasion resistance or like what we call fire foil, it's like a heat sleeve, don't forget any of it, and make sure you get enough. But also, this stuff is expensive, so you don't want to get too much of it. We are fortunate to keep a pretty big inventory of XRP stuff here, so I can always kind of go in and pull like a fitting out of the inventory and put it in place of another, and you know, kind of take that off the list, etc, etc. But you might not be able to do that, so I suggest double checking what you have, what's available, and what you're going to need. And these lists are a great way to do it. So once you have your list all made out with all your hoses and fittings and adapters, hose lengths, fire foil, everything you need, you then have to convert all of your little notes to part numbers so you can order them. That's what we have to do, at least. You might be able to just go right to Summit or wherever you get your stuff. But since we buy everything directly from XRP, as we are a distributor for them, we have to order with part numbers. And so that is a little bit of a time-consuming process as well, but it makes sure that we get the right parts the first time. So you end up having a list that looks something like this. Part numbers. And you look at these part numbers enough, and you know what they end up meaning. Race crimp, 22, 00 is a straight, 08 is a -8, so that's a straight -8 with the turned down nut in black. So you do that for every fitting, and you eventually have a big list. And then a few days later, it shows up, and you can start plumbing your car. In the next episode, I'm going to show you guys the plumbing process. This stuff will all be here by then, and we'll be getting to work. Thanks for watching.